The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, acrid and impossible to ignore. Mom, you're a burden, okay? I can't keep pretending you're not. I stood in my son Marcus's gleaming downtown apartment, holding the casserole, dish I'd brought for his birthday dinner. Homemade lasagna, his favorite since he was 8. The same dish that had gotten me through culinary school finals 25 years ago, back when I was a single mother working 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. A burden, I repeated softly, setting the dish on his granite countertop. The kitchen was immaculate, all stainless steel and sharp edges. Nothing like the warm chaos of our old kitchen where I'd taught him to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. I mean, yeah. Marcus ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, avoiding my eyes. Look, I'm grateful for everything you did when I was a kid, but I'm 32 now. I have my own life, my own career. And honestly, having to explain why my mom still calls me 3 times a week, still shows up with food like I'm some college student, it's embarrassing. The apartment filled with the sound of his new girlfriend, Brittany's uncomfortable laugh. She was perched on his Italian leather sofa, her designer heels kicked off carelessly on the Persian rug I'd helped him pick out last Christmas. Marcus, maybe, no, Britt, Mom needs to hear this. He turned back to me, his jaw set in that stubborn line I remembered from his teenage years. I'm trying to build something here. A real career in finance. A relationship with someone who gets my world. And every time you show up talking about your little bakery problems or asking if I'm eating enough vegetables, it reminds everyone that I come from, well, from where I come from. I looked around his apartment, taking in the expensive furniture, the city view, the wine collection worth more than I made in 6 months at my bakery. Everything I'd dreamed of for him when I was working 16-hour days to pay for his college, his MBA, his first apartment deposit. I see, I said quietly. Do you? His green eyes, my eyes, flashed with frustration. Because I don't think you do. I love you, Mom. I really do. But love isn't enough anymore. I need space. I need you to stop acting like I still need you. Brittany shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her manicured fingers playing with her phone. She'd never worked a day in her life, I'd learned during our awkward introduction 6 months ago. Trust fund baby, born into the world Marcus was clawing his way into. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The thing is, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest, I never thought of love as something that could be enough or not enough. I thought it just was. Marcus sighed, the sound sharp with impatience. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not saying we can't have a relationship. I'm just saying it needs to look different. More adult. Adult, I echoed. Yeah, like, maybe we talk once a month instead of every few days. Maybe you don't just show up without calling. Maybe you understand that I have a life that doesn't revolve around being your son. I nodded slowly, looking at this stranger who wore my son's face but spoke in corporate buzzwords and calculated distance. And what does that look like exactly? This adult relationship? He brightened, as if I'd finally understood an important business proposal. Well, for starters, you could focus more on your own life. That bakery of yours. Maybe it's time to think bigger. Expand. Stop treating it like some hobby and make it a real business. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus had no idea that Rosie's Corner Bakery wasn't just a neighborhood shop where I made cupcakes and coffee for regulars. He'd never bothered to look beyond the flour-dusted apron and the modest storefront, never asked about the commercial contracts or the wholesale accounts or the food truck business I'd been quietly building for the past 5 years. But then, why would he? To him, I was just his small-town mother who'd somehow managed to embarrass him into success. "You're right," I said, picking up my purse. "It's time I focused on my own life." Something in my tone must have registered because Marcus's expression shifted slightly, uncertainty creeping in around the edges. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said." I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I hope 32 brings you everything you're looking for." I left the lasagna on his counter. The elevator ride down to the parking garage gave me exactly 2 minutes and 37 seconds to compartmentalize my heartbreak. By the time I reached my car, a modest Honda Civic that Marcus always looked embarrassed to be seen near, I had my phone out and was dialing a familiar number. "Rosa, it's Eleanor. Are you free for dinner? I have news." Rosa Martinez had been my best friend since culinary school, back when we were both young mothers trying to build careers from scratch. She'd gone on to open 3 successful restaurants in the city while I'd stayed small and local, content with my neighborhood bakery and the community I'd built around it, or so I'd let everyone believe. "He said you were a burden." Rosa's voice rose with outrage as she poured wine into my glass. We were sitting in her kitchen, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a chef's home, copper pots hanging from every available hook, herbs growing in mason jars on the windowsill, the lingering scent of garlic and fresh bread. His exact words. I took a sip of the wine, letting the familiar warmth steady my nerves, followed by a lecture about how I need to treat my bakery like a real business instead of a hobby. Rosa snorted. "The same bakery that supplies bread to half the restaurants. In 3 counties? The one with the catering contracts you can't even keep up with?" "That hobby?" I managed to smile. "That's the one." "Dios mío, Eleanor. That boy has no idea what you've built, does he?" "I never told him." I ran my finger around the rim of my wine glass. After his father left, after all those years of him being ashamed that we didn't have what the other kids had, when I finally started making real money, I wanted him to have his pride. I wanted him to believe he'd made it on his own merit. "So you've been what? Pretending to be poor for the last decade?" "Not pretending to be poor. Just not advertising that I'm not." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a photo from last month's catering event. "Remember the Morrison wedding? 200 guests, full 5-course reception menu?" Rosa whistled low. "That's a $20,000 event, minimum." 28, actually. And it was just one weekend. I showed her another photo. "This is from the corporate retreat I catered in Aspen last month. Tech startup, money no object." "Eleanor." Rosa leaned back in her chair, studying me with the intensity she usually reserved for perfecting a new sauce. "What aren't you telling me?" I set down my phone and met her eyes. "Marcus thinks I run a small neighborhood bakery that barely pays the bills. What he doesn't know is that I own the building his bakery is in, and the building next to it, and the commercial kitchen facility that supplies 12 restaurants in the metro area." Rosa's eyes widened. "How much are we talking about here?" "The business is worth about $2.8 million. The real estate portfolio is worth another 4.5. I took another sip of wine. "I've been buying property in the arts district for 8 years, quietly, through shell companies." "You're a millionaire." Several times over, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My hobby generates more revenue than most Fortune 500 companies' side divisions, but Marcus sees flour on my apron and assumes I'm barely scraping by." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Why, Eleanor? Why hide all this?" I thought about Marcus at 18, graduating high school with a chip on his shoulder about being the poor kid, about the scholarships he'd refused because he thought they were charity, about the way he'd worked himself half to death through college, determined to prove he was more than his circumstances, because he needed to believe he could do it himself. And he did. His success in finance is real, it's his own. But somewhere along the way, he forgot where he came from. Or maybe he just decided he was ashamed of it. And now? I pulled up another photo on my phone, the property deed for the building that housed 3 high-end boutiques and a wine bar in the city's most expensive shopping district. Now I think it's time my son learned that success isn't just about what you make. It's about what you build, and what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love. Rosa raised her glass. To teaching ungrateful children about respect, to teaching my son that the woman he thinks is a burden might just be the foundation his whole world is built on. I clinked my glass against hers. But first, I need to make a few phone calls. The next morning, I stood in my bakery at 4 a.m., the same time I'd been arriving for the past 15 years. The familiar ritual of checking the ovens, reviewing the day's orders, and starting the first batch of bread helped center my thoughts. But today felt different. Today, I wasn't just Eleanor Chen, the neighborhood baker. Today, I was Eleanor Chen, businesswoman and property owner, about to make some very strategic decisions. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom, about last night. Maybe I was a little harsh. Can we talk?" I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I called my property manager. "David, it's Eleanor. I need you to review the lease agreements for the Meridian Street properties. Specifically, I want to know who's behind Cloud Tech Innovations. They're renting the top floor of the Harrison Building." The Harrison Building was one of my newest acquisitions, a sleek office complex in the financial district. I'd bought it through a shell company 6 months ago, right around the time Marcus had started talking about how successful his new job was. "I'll have that information for you by noon," David promised. Next, I called my business attorney. "Janet, I need you to prepare some documents. I'm considering a major expansion of my catering operations, and I want everything structured properly from the start." What I didn't tell Janet was that my expansion plans might involve teaching a certain financial analyst that underestimating people, especially his mother, could be a very expensive mistake. By 6 a.m., the bakery was filled with the scent of fresh bread and the quiet bustle of my morning customers. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been coming in for her daily scone and coffee for 12 years. Tom, the construction worker who always ordered 3 blueberry muffins and a large black coffee. Sarah, the young teacher who treated herself to a croissant every Friday. These people knew me as Eleanor, the baker who remembered their orders and asked about their families. They had no idea that the woman who handed them their morning pastries was quietly buying up half the downtown core. "Eleanor!" Mrs. Patterson's voice broke through my thoughts. "Did you see the news about that new development going up on 5th Street? They're saying it's going to bring in all sorts of fancy businesses. I hope it doesn't change the neighborhood too much." I smiled, refilling her coffee cup. "Change isn't always bad, Mrs. Patterson. Sometimes it just means new opportunities." What she didn't know was that I was the primary investor in that development. What Marcus didn't know was that his company, Cloud Tech Innovations, had already submitted a proposal to lease space in the new building. The morning passed in its usual rhythm, but underneath the familiar routine, I was planning. By the time I closed the front doors at 2 p.m., I had 3 meetings scheduled, 2 property inspections arranged, and 1 very specific phone call to make. I locked up the bakery and drove to my real office, not the tiny back room behind the shop where I did the basic bookkeeping, but the corporate suite on the 10th floor of the Meridian Tower, the same building where my son worked, 3 floors below, completely unaware that his mother owned the building he thought was so impressive. My assistant, Caroline, looked up as I entered. "Ms. Chen, your 3 o'clock is here early, and your property manager called. He has that information you requested. Send David in first, then we'll take the other meeting." David Martinez, Rosa's cousin and one of the sharpest real estate minds in the city, came in carrying a thick folder. "Eleanor, you're going to find this interesting. Cloud Tech Innovations is indeed your son's company. But here's the kicker. They're in financial trouble." I leaned forward. "What kind of trouble?" The kind where their main investor pulled out last month, and they're scrambling to find new funding. They've got about 60 days before they default on their current lease, and they can't qualify for the space in your new development without significant collateral. I studied the financial reports David had compiled. Marcus's company was bleeding money, despite the impressive revenue numbers they'd reported publicly. Typical startup problems: too much expansion too fast, not enough cash flow management. They're looking for a co-signer on their loan application, David continued. Someone with significant assets who can guarantee the debt if they default. The irony was perfect. My son, who'd just told me I was a burden, was about to need exactly the kind of help only I could provide. What kind of assets would they need as collateral? David consulted his notes. For the loan amount they're seeking, about $2 million, they'd need someone with a net worth of at least $5 million, preferably in liquid or real estate assets. I smiled. Draft a proposal for cloud tech. Tell them you represent an investor who might be interested in their business model. Set up a meeting for next week. What name should I use for the investor? I thought for a moment. EM Chen Holdings. And David? Make sure Marcus Morrison is in that meeting. After David left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, my son was probably having lunch at some expensive restaurant, complaining to his colleagues about his overbearing mother and her small-town bakery. He had no idea that his overbearing mother owned the building he worked in, had the capital to save his failing company, and was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life about judging people by their appearances. My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. Mom, I think we should meet. There's something I need to discuss with you. This time I responded, I'm busy building my real business. Maybe next month if I have time. I could almost see his confusion through the screen. Marcus was used to me dropping everything when he called, used to being the center of my world even when he clearly didn't want to be. But that version of his mother, the one who existed only to serve his needs and absorb his embarrassment, was about to evolve into something much more complicated. I pulled up the financial reports for Cloud Tech one more time, studying the numbers with the same intensity I'd once applied to perfecting my croissant recipe. Marcus had built something. Impressive, I had to admit. The company had real potential, innovative software solutions, and a talented team. But potential didn't pay the bills, and talent didn't guarantee financial success. What they needed was experience, wisdom, and most importantly, capital. What they needed was someone exactly like the mother Marcus had just dismissed as a burden. I picked up my phone and called my investment advisor. Richard, it's Eleanor Chen. I want to liquidate some assets and set up a new investment fund, something focused on tech startups with good bones but poor cash flow management. How much are we talking about, Eleanor? I looked out at the city, again, imagining Marcus in his office 3 floors below, probably stressing about numbers he couldn't balance and problems he couldn't solve. Let's start with 10 million. And Richard, I want this fund to be very selective about its investments. I'm looking for companies that have forgotten the value of loyalty, respect, and family. The foundation was set. Now, I just had to wait for my son to realize he needed exactly what he'd just thrown away. As I gathered my things to leave, Caroline buzzed my intercom. Ms. Chen, there's a Marcus Morrison here to see you. He says it's urgent and he's willing to wait. I smiled, checking my watch. It had taken him exactly 6 hours to realize he might have made a mistake. Tell Mr. Morrison that EM Chen Holdings doesn't take walk-in appointments. If he'd like to schedule a meeting, he can go through proper channels like everyone else. Should I tell him you're not available today? Tell him I'm busy running my real business. Through my office window, I could see Marcus in the lobby, still wearing his expensive suit but looking decidedly less confident than he had the night before. He was talking animatedly with Caroline, gesturing with the kind of desperation that suggested his world was starting to crack around the edges. Good. Sometimes the only way to teach someone to value what they have is to show them what it feels like to lose it. But as I watched my son plead with my assistant for just 5 minutes of my time, I felt the familiar tug of maternal instinct. The part of me that had worked 3 jobs to keep him fed and clothed, that had sacrificed my own dreams to fund his education, that had hidden my success to preserve his pride. That part of me wanted to run downstairs, wrap him in my arms, and fix whatever was wrong. Instead, I gathered my purse, took the private elevator to the parking garage, and drove home to plan my next move. After all, the best lessons in business, and in life, are the ones people have to learn for themselves. Even if their teacher happens to be the mother they just called a burden. The evening light filtered through my kitchen window as I prepared dinner for one. A far cry from the elaborate birthday feast I'd planned to share with Marcus. But as I chopped vegetables for a simple stir-fry, my mind wasn't on solitude or self-pity, it was on strategy. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with increasingly desperate messages from Marcus. First, casual requests to talk. Then concerned questions about why I wasn't answering. Finally, a voicemail that had made me smile despite everything. "Mom, I went by your bakery but you were closed." Then I tried that office building where Mrs. Patterson said she thought she saw you, but they said there was no Eleanor Chen there. "Look, I know I was out of line last night. Can you please just call me back? There's something important I need to discuss with you." The something important, I suspected, was his company's financial crisis. The same crisis that would require exactly the kind of help only a financial burden like me could provide. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled at my kitchen table with my laptop. Time to do some research on my son's business troubles. CloudTech's public filings painted a picture of ambitious growth and impressive projections. But the private financial documents David had obtained told a different story. Cash flow problems, overextended credit lines, and a recent partnership deal that had fallen through at the last minute. Marcus was good at his job. I could see that in the sophisticated financial models and innovative software solutions his team had developed. But being good at finance and being good at running a business were 2 entirely different skills. Skills I'd learned the hard way, through 15 years of building something from nothing. My laptop chimed with an email from my investment advisor. The EM Chen Holdings Fund was officially established, with $10 million in startup capital and a very specific investment mandate. Undervalued companies with strong fundamentals, but poor family relationships. I was going to enjoy this. More than I probably should. My phone rang, and Rose's name appeared on the screen. "How did the rest of your day go?" she asked without preamble. "Enlightening. Did you know my son's company is about to go under? The same son who called you a burden?" "The very same. Turns out he's going to need a co-signer for a $2 million loan or his startup is finished." Rose's laugh was sharp with satisfaction. "Oh, this is going to be good. Please tell me you're going to make him grovel." "I'm going to make him learn," I corrected. "There's a difference." "What's the plan?" I looked at the financial projections spread across my kitchen table, at the property deeds stacked beside my laptop, at the life I'd built while pretending to be smaller than I was. "I'm going to save his company," I said. "But first, I'm going to let him understand exactly what he almost lost." As if summoned by my words, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Marcus standing on my front porch, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers and wearing an expression of barely controlled panic. "Rosa, I have to go. My son is at the door." "Remember," she said before hanging up, "sometimes the people who need us most are the ones who claim they need us least." I set the phone aside and opened the door. Marcus looked older than he had just 24 hours ago. His perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much. "Mom." His voice was quiet, uncertain. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside to let him in, noting how his eyes took in my modest living room, the same space he'd grown up in, the same furniture he'd once begged me to replace with something that wouldn't embarrass him in front of his friends. "I brought these for you." He held out the flowers and I could see his hands trembling slightly. "I know they're not much, but they're lovely." I took them to the kitchen, arranging them in a simple vase while he followed behind me like a lost child. "Would you like some dinner?" "I was just cooking." Yes, please." I set another place at the table, noting how Marcus kept glancing at his phone, checking the time, fidgeting with nervous energy. "Is everything all right?" I asked, though I knew exactly what was wrong. "Actually, no. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need your help." I served the stir-fry, pouring him a glass of water and settling across from him at the same table where I'd helped him with homework for 12 years. "I'm listening." Marcus took a deep breath. "My company is in trouble. Financial trouble. We had a major investor pull out, and now we can't make our lease payments or qualify for the expansion loan we need to stay competitive." I ate slowly, letting him fill the silence. "The thing is, we have amazing products, revolutionary software that could change how small businesses manage their finances. But we expanded too fast, took on too much overhead, and now—" He ran a hand through his hair. "Now we need a co-signer for a $2 million loan, or we're going to lose everything." "I see." I set down my fork. "And you're telling me this because I need you to co-sign the loan." The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure could bear the weight of crossing. "You need me," I repeated carefully, "to put my assets at risk to guarantee your business debt." "Yes." His voice was barely a whisper. I leaned back in my chair, studying this man who 12 hours ago had called me a burden, who had been embarrassed by my phone calls and mortified by my casseroles. "Marcus, yesterday you told me I was holding you back, that I needed to stop acting like you still needed me. That love wasn't enough anymore." His face flushed. "I know. I was wrong. I was stressed and I took it out on you, and I'm sorry." "Are you sorry because you hurt my feelings, or because you need my help?" "Both." He met my eyes. "Mom, I know I've been a terrible son lately. I know I've been ungrateful and cruel and wrong about so many things, but please don't let my mistakes destroy what I've built." I thought about the young man who'd once been so proud of his mother's cooking that he'd bring friends home just to show off her chocolate chip cookies. About the teenager who'd called me from college every Sunday, excited to share his grades and his dreams. About the son who'd once told me I was his hero. And I thought about the man sitting across from me now, successful and ambitious and completely unaware that the woman he'd dismissed as irrelevant controlled more wealth than he'd ever dreamed of. "What makes you think I can help with a $2 million loan?" I asked. "I'm just a small-town baker with a hobby business, remember?" Marcus looked confused. I know you don't have that kind of money, but you own this house, and the bakery, building, and I thought maybe you could use them as collateral." "You want me to risk my home and my business to save your company?" I know it's a lot to ask. I know I have no right to ask it. But Mom, you're the only person I can turn to. I stood up, walking to the kitchen window and looking out at the garden I'd tended for 20 years. The same garden where Marcus had played as a child, where I'd taught him to plant tomatoes and pull weeds and understand that growing things took patience, time, and careful attention. "Tell me about your business," I said without turning around. "Not the financial trouble, the actual work you do." Marcus's voice grew stronger, more confident as he described CloudTech's software solutions, their client base, their innovative approaches to financial management for small businesses. I could hear the passion in his voice, the genuine pride in what his team had created. He was good at what he did. More than good, he was talented, innovative, and driven. Everything I'd hoped he'd become when I was working 3 jobs to pay for his education. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that success wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about understanding where you came from, honoring the people who helped you get there, and never being too proud to ask for help when you needed it. Your software helps small businesses manage their finances better? I asked. Exactly. We make it easier for entrepreneurs to track cash flow, manage inventory, handle payroll, all the things that most small business owners struggle with because they don't have formal financial training. I turned back to him. Like bakers, for instance? Well, yes. Bakeries, restaurants, retail shops, any small business that needs better financial tools. And you think this software would be valuable to someone like me? Marcus hesitated. Mom, no offense, but I'm not sure you'd be able to use software this sophisticated. It's designed for businesses with complex financial needs. I smiled. Complex financial needs, like managing multiple revenue streams, tracking inventory across different locations, handling payroll for dozens of employees, managing commercial contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Well, yes. But your bakery has all of those things, I finished quietly. Marcus stared at me. What are you talking about? I walked to my home office, the small room Marcus assumed I used for personal bills and hobby bookkeeping. I pulled out a thick binder and set it on the kitchen table in front of him. These are the financial statements for Rosie's Corner Bakery and its subsidiary operations, I said. Take a look. Marcus opened the binder, his eyes scanning the first page. I watched his expression change from confusion to surprise to complete shock as he turned page after page of profit and loss statements, asset inventories, and revenue. Projections. Mom. His voice was barely audible. These numbers are real. I sat back down across from him. Last year, my hobby business generated $1.2 million in revenue. Net profit was just over $400,000. But how? It's just a neighborhood bakery. Is it? I pulled out another folder. This is my catering division. We handle corporate events, weddings, private parties. This folder contains my wholesale accounts. I supply bread and pastries to 17 restaurants and 4 grocery chains. And this, I set down a third folder, is my commercial kitchen facility, which I rent to other food entrepreneurs. Marcus stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. I don't understand. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because you never asked. I kept my voice gentle but firm. You decided what you thought my life looked like, and you never bothered to look deeper. But you always seemed so small. So local. I am local. I chose to build my business in the community where I raised you, where I have roots, where I can make a difference in people's lives every day. But small and local doesn't mean unsuccessful or unsophisticated. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing. So when I asked you to co-sign my loan, you were asking someone with a net worth of approximately $7 million to help save your $2 million company. The number hit him like a physical blow. He leaned back in his chair, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. 7 million? Give or take. I haven't had everything appraised recently. Mom, I had no idea. I thought you were just getting by, that you needed my help more than I needed yours. I reached across the table and took his hand. Sweetheart, I've never needed your money. What I needed was your respect, your love, your acknowledgement that the woman who raised you might have value beyond what she could do for you. Tears started forming in his eyes. I called you a burden. Yes. You did? When you could buy and sell my entire company, probably several times over. I squeezed his hand. But Marcus, the money isn't the point. The point is that you looked at me and saw only what you expected to see. You never asked about my dreams, my goals, my achievements. You just assumed I was living some small, sad life waiting for your phone calls to give me purpose. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know you are. I stood up, gathering the financial documents. But sorry doesn't fix the underlying problem. You still need that loan, and you still don't really understand who I am or what I've built. Marcus looked up at me, hope and fear warring in his expression. Does that mean you won't help me? I smiled, thinking about the meeting I'd scheduled for next week, about the investment fund I'd just established, about the lesson I was about to teach my son about assumptions and appearances. Oh, I'm going to help you, I said. But not in the way you think, and definitely not in the way you're expecting. What do you mean? You'll find out soon enough. I began clearing the dinner dishes. For now, why don't you go home and get some sleep? You look exhausted. Mom, please. My company is going to fail if we don't get this loan approved by next Friday. No, I corrected him. Your company is going to fail if you don't learn to see the opportunities that are right in front of you. Sometimes the help we need comes from the places we least expect it. As Marcus left that night, still confused and worried but no longer quite so desperate, I stood in my kitchen thinking about the week ahead. By next Friday, my son would understand exactly what kind of burden his mother really was. He'd learn that success came in many forms, that respect had to be earned, not assumed, and that the people you dismiss as irrelevant might just hold the keys to your future. But most importantly, he'd learn that a mother's love wasn't a burden to be carried. It was a foundation to be built upon, and I was about to show him just how solid that foundation really was. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a carefully orchestrated plan. I stood in the executive conference room of the Meridian Tower, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Marcus paced nervously in the lobby 20 floors below. He was 15 minutes early for his 10 a.m. meeting with E.M. Chen Holdings, clutching his presentation folder like a lifeline. Ms. Chen, your son has arrived, Caroline announced through the intercom. Send him up in exactly 3 minutes, I replied, adjusting my tailored Armani suit, the same steel gray that had become my armor in corporate battles. And Caroline? Record everything. Marcus entered the conference room with the confident stride of a man trying to hide his desperation. His eyes swept the room, taking in the mahogany table, the city view, the subtle displays of wealth and power that decorated every serious business office. What he didn't expect was to see his mother sitting at the head of the table. Hello, Marcus. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please, have a seat. His face cycled through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. Mom? What are you doing here? I'm supposed to meet with an investor. You are. I slid a business card across the polished table. Eleanor Margaret Chen, founder and CEO of E.M. Chen Holdings. Marcus stared at the card as if it might spontaneously combust. I don't understand. I think you do. I opened the folder in front of me, revealing his company's financial records, loan applications, and the detailed proposal David had submitted on CloudTech's behalf. You need $2 million. I have $2 million. It's simple mathematics. You're the investor? His voice cracked slightly. This whole time, you've been the investor we've been trying to reach? I'm an investor. Whether I become your investor depends entirely on your presentation. I leaned back in my chair, channeling every ounce of boardroom authority I'd cultivated over 15 years of business dealings. You have 15 minutes to convince me that CloudTech Innovations is worth my money. Make it count. For the next quarter hour, I watched my son transform into the brilliant businessman I'd always known he could be. His nervousness evaporated as he dove into financial projections, market analysis, and product demonstrations. He was passionate, articulate, and genuinely impressive. He was also completely unaware that he was pitching to his own mother. Your software is innovative, I said when he finished. Your team is talented. Your market research is thorough. But I have one concern. What's that? Your management philosophy. I pulled up the recording from our dinner conversation 3 nights ago, his voice crystal clear as it filled the conference room. Mom, you're a burden, okay? I can't keep pretending you're not. Marcus went pale. Mom, I can explain. No need. Your position is quite clear. I paused the recording and met his eyes. You believe successful people should distance themselves from their origins. That family connections are embarrassing liabilities rather than valuable assets. That respect flows only upward, never downward. I was wrong about that. Completely wrong. Were you? Or are you just saying that because you need my money? I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the bakery district where I'd built my first business. Tell me, Marcus, what would happen if I gave you this loan and cloud tech became wildly successful? Would you still take my phone calls? Would you still be embarrassed by your mother who owns a bakery? Yes. No. He struggled for words. Mom, I've learned my lesson. I understand now that I was being ungrateful and short-sighted. Have you? I turned back to him. Because I'm not just offering you a loan, Marcus. I'm offering you a partnership. His eyes widened. A partnership? Your software is exactly what small businesses need. My network includes hundreds of small business owners who trust my judgment. Together, we could build something extraordinary. I returned to my seat. But partnerships require mutual respect. They require understanding that everyone brings value to the table, regardless of how that value might appear on the surface. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what I was offering. What are the terms? Standard commercial loan rates. Full personal guarantee from me, which removes your cosigner requirement. But I want 40% ownership in cloud tech and a seat on your board of directors. 40%? That's fair. Compensation for the risk I'm taking and the value I'm bringing. I slid a contract across the table. I'm not just offering money, Marcus. I'm offering 15 years of small business expertise, a client network worth millions in potential revenue, and a mother's unwavering support for her son's dreams. He stared at the contract, and I could see him wrestling with his pride, his assumptions, and his desperate need for capital. There's one more condition, I added quietly. Sunday dinners. Once a month minimum. And you answer when I call. Not because you have to, but because you want to hear about my day. Tears started forming in his eyes. Mom, I'm not a burden. Marcus, I'm your mother, and I'm also a successful businesswoman who's built something remarkable while you weren't paying attention. I stood and extended my hand across the table. The question is, are you ready to see me as both? Marcus looked at my outstretched hand, then up at my face, and I saw the exact moment when everything clicked. When he finally understood that the woman he'd dismissed as small town and irrelevant was offering him not just salvation, but partnership. Not just money, but respect. He stood and shook my hand. Yes, ma'am. I'm ready. Good. I smiled, feeling years of hidden pride finally allowed to surface. Then let's save your company. Partners. 6 months later, Cloud Tech Innovations had tripled its client base, secured 3 major corporate contracts, and was being featured in Forbes as one of the year's most promising startups. The article's headline read, Mother-Son Team Revolutionizes Small Business Software. I was quoted extensively about the importance of family in business, the value of understanding your roots, and the power of combining traditional wisdom with innovative technology. Marcus was quoted talking about his brilliant business partner who happened to also make the world's best lasagna. The bakery was busier than ever, not because I needed the income, but because it grounded me. Every morning, I still arrived at 4 a.m. to start the bread, still remembered my regulars' orders, still enjoyed the simple satisfaction of feeding my community. But now, 3 afternoons a week, I also sat in CloudTech's boardroom, offering strategic guidance to a team of brilliant young entrepreneurs who'd learned to value experience as much as innovation. And every Sunday, Marcus came to dinner, not out of obligation, but because he'd finally learned the difference between burden and blessing, between dependence and interdependence, between a mother's love and a mother's wisdom. Sometimes he still brought Brittany, though she'd grown notably more respectful since learning about my net worth. More often, he came alone, eager to share his week's victories and challenges with the woman who'd taught him that success wasn't about how high you climbed, but about remembering to throw down a rope for the next person. "You know what I realized?" he said over dessert one Sunday evening, his voice thoughtful. "I spent so many years trying to prove I didn't need you that I never bothered to find out what you needed from me." "And what do I need from you?" I asked, refilling his coffee cup. "Respect. Acknowledgement. The chance to be proud of what you've built instead of pretending it doesn't exist." He met my eyes. "And maybe for you to finally upgrade this kitchen." "Seriously, Mom, you can afford marble countertops." I laughed, looking around at my modest kitchen with its worn linoleum and outdated appliances. "Maybe. But then, where would I put all the memories?" "We'll make new ones," Marcus said simply. "Better ones." As I cleared the dishes that night, I reflected on the journey from burden to partner, from dismissed to respected, from hidden success to acknowledged achievement. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destruction or humiliation. It was about transformation, about teaching someone to see not just what you could do for them, but what you could build together. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it was about watching your son finally understand that a mother's love wasn't a weight to be carried, but wings to help him soar higher than he'd ever imagined possible. After all, the strongest foundations are built not on what we take, but on what we give, and what we're brave enough to reveal about ourselves when the people we love are finally ready to see. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.